Curze lifted the last piece of his armor from the shadowed alcove and raised it above his head. He turned towards the door of his chamber and lowered his helmet until the skull-faced visor connected to his gorget with a hiss of pressurization. His vision shifted subtly, and his perceptions broadened as he blended with the shadows of the dimly lit chamber. He slowed his breathing and stretched out his senses, the darkness a second home to him after so many years spent in its embrace as a predator on the weak and guilty. He felt a moment's regret that it had come to this, but he quashed such notions viciously. Doubt, regret, and hesitancy were weaknesses others might suffer from, but not Konrad Curze. His breathing deepened, and the tenebrous chamber came alive to him. Curze felt power in the darkness, the cold intellect of hunters and creatures of the night that killed beneath its cloak. Lethal instincts honed on 1,000 battlefields were now heightened to undreamed-of levels, and would now serve him equally well on this one. He spread his arms wide, and a ripple of psychic force pulsed like the blast wave of an explosion, with Curze at its epicenter. The hanging glow strips filling the chamber exploded in quick succession, detonating one after another in showers of pellucid sparks. Broken glass tinkled musically to the steel deck in a glass rain. Sputtering power cables swayed from the ceiling, hissing and fizzing like angry snakes as electric discharge strobed blue across the room. Hostile red warning lights blinked. Cold light eased inside as the door opened, and a handful of armored warriors stood silhouetted. Curze leapt straight up, gripping the open lattice structure of the nearest column, and swinging himself up into the deeper darkness of the chamber before the light could reach him. His legs swung around the column, and he climbed higher as the warriors spread out with their halberds extended before them. He heard them call his name, their voices echoing in the darkness. A twist of muscle, and he was airborne, a glimmering shadow of dead stars and extinction. The warriors below would have the senses of their battle plate to penetrate the darkness, but they paled in comparison to those of the Night Lord's Primarch, where others saw only light and dark. Curze saw all the myriad hues and shades that were invisible to those who had not become one with its fuliginous depths. One of the Phoenix guards stood directly beneath him, scanning the chamber for its captive occupant, unaware that his doom lurked in the shadows above. Curze spun around the column, looping lower with each revolution, holding his hand out like an axe blade. The warrior died, his head sliced cleanly from his shoulders, the iron flesh of the Primarch smashing through his armored gorget. No sooner was the blow delivered than Curze was in motion, swooping through the darkness like a shadow. Cries of alarm echoed as his jailers realized he was amongst them, stabbing beams of helmet lamps, crisscrossing madly as they sought to pinpoint his location. With skill born of decades spent as a murderous hunter of men, Curze ghosted invisibly between the beams of light. Another warrior fell, his torso ripped open, blood squirting from torn arteries like ruptured pressure hoses. Gunfire split the darkness, starbursts of muzzle flashes, as the warriors opened fire on their unseen attacker. None came close, for wherever they fired, Curze was already far from harm's way, spinning through the air like a malignant phantom, twisting between the bolts and wildly slashing blades. One of Dorn's Templars backed towards a pool of light, and Curze slid through the darkness towards him, moving impossibly silently for an armored warrior. A sensation unlike anything he had felt previously danced in his blood, and Curze savored it, as he understood it for what it was. Contrary to Guilliman's rash pronouncement, it seemed Astartes could know fear. This fear, such as it was something to be treasured. Mortal fear was a rancid, sweaty thing, but this was caged lightning in the marrow. Curze pounced towards the armored Templar, one of Dorn's best and bravest. Veteran or not, he died as any other man did, in blood and agony. "Death haunts the darkness," shouted Curze, "and he knows your names." He could hear frantic calls for reinforcements, but the superior systems of his own armor easily jammed them. He took to the air once more, vaulted from shadow to shadow. "No one is coming," he said. "You are going to die alone here." Spraying blasts of gunfire followed his pronouncements, as the warriors sought to pinpoint his location in the darkness. But Curze owned the darkness, and no matter what light or senses these warriors depended upon, they were not nearly enough to stop him from killing them. He could see the survivors, a Templar and 2 of the Phoenix Guard, backing towards the door. They now realized this was a fight they could not win, but they had made the mistake of thinking that a fight with Konrad Curze was one you could walk away from. Laughing with the joy of the hunt, a pleasure he had forgotten without worthy prey to test him, he soared through the air and dropped into their midst like an assassin. His fist punched through the armor of the first Phoenix Guard, and Curze wrenched his victim's spinal column out, leaving the bloody curve of crushed bone protruding from the gaping wound. He snatched the dead warrior's halberd and dropped to the floor, as the other warriors turned towards the agonized scream. Before they could react, Curze swept the halberd out in a wide, circular arc. The blade, twice the width of a handspan above the deck, cut through battle plate, meat, and bone with a searing electric tang. Both warriors fell to the deck, grunting in pain as they collapsed onto the bloody stumps of their legs. Curze hurled his stolen halberd aside and blocked a return strike from the fallen Phoenix Guard. He snapped his enemy's weapon in 2 and jammed the splintered ends through his chest. The Templar roared in anger, managing to get off a shot before Curze was upon him. He ripped the weapon from his victim's grip and planted one knee on his chest, the other on his left arm. The pinned warrior reached up with his free arm to strike at him. Curze caught the blow and ripped the arm from its socket. Emergency lights began kicking in, a rising hum and the thump of relays echoing through the chamber. Suddenly the harsh, white glow dispelled the shadows, banished the darkness. Where before there had been darkness, now there was only light, and what had once been a place of imprisonment was now an abattoir. Curling arcs of blood spray coated the walls and floor. Shattered, headless, limbless bodies lay strewn about like spilled surgical waste. Curze smiled at the scene of slaughter, and the persona he had worn like a disguise since he had first knelt before his father fell away like a discarded mask. Now, he was no longer Konrad Curze. Now, he was the Night Haunter,